Dean Martin was halfway through the third verse of Everybody Loves Somebody when he saw the knife. Not in anyone's hand. Not being waved around like some cheap threat. Just sitting there on the bar counter, folded open, the blade catching the spotlight like it wanted to be noticed. The man behind the knife wore a gray suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. And if you knew anything about Chicago in late 1967, you knew exactly who that man was. Not his name, maybe. People didn't say his name out loud, but you knew the type. The kind of guy who walks into a room and the temperature drops 5 degrees. Dean paused. Not dramatically. Not like some actor in a movie. He just stopped singing mid-word, still holding his glass of whiskey like he'd been about to take a sip. The band behind him stumbled over themselves, trying to figure out what was happening. The audience, packed tight in the Crown Imperial nightclub, went dead silent. You could hear ice melting in drinks. And then Dean Martin did something that would either cement his legend or end his life right there on that stage. He walked over to the bar, casual as hell, and set his whiskey glass down on the table. Right next to the knife, right in front of the man in the gray suit. Just placed it there like he was offering a drink to an old friend. Not a word, not a smile, just a glass of whiskey and a look that said, "Your move." Now, to understand why this moment mattered, why it wasn't just some drunk performer making a stupid decision, you need to understand Chicago in 1967. This wasn't some fantasy version of the entertainment world where artists were untouchable celebrities. This was a city where the nightlife and the criminal underworld weren't just connected, they were the same damn thing. The Crown Imperial, where Dean performed regularly, wasn't funded by investors or music executives. It was bankrolled by the outfit. That's what they called the Chicago organization back then. Everyone knew it. Everyone pretended not to know it. That was how you stayed alive. You entertained the crowds, you collected your paycheck, you kept your mouth shut, and most importantly, you never ever disrespected the men who decided whether your career continued or whether you disappeared. Frank Sinatra understood this. He'd been navigating these waters for years, maintaining his complicated relationships with these circles. The Rat Pack, Dean, Frank, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop, they all operated under the same unspoken code. You perform, you charm, you make people laugh, you make them forget their problems. But you never forget who's really running the show. You never question the hand that feeds you. Dean Martin grew up understanding this world better than most performers ever would. He wasn't some kid from the suburbs who stumbled into entertainment and then got scared when he realized what kind of business he was really in. Dean was from the industrial side of Cleveland, the kind of neighborhood where his uncle ran a meat shop that everyone knew wasn't really about selling meat. It was a meeting place, a spot where men came to discuss things that couldn't be discussed anywhere else, things that got solved without lawyers or police. Dean saw these men as a kid. He watched how they carried themselves. He learned their code. Respect mattered more than fear. Loyalty meant everything. But showing weakness, that was the fastest way to end up gone. Most people in the entertainment world learned these lessons through horror stories and close calls. Dean learned them by watching his uncle shake hands with men who smiled while discussing someone's funeral. But here's the thing about Dean Martin that made him different from every other performer who crossed paths with these people. He had this quality that you can't fake, can't learn, can't manufacture. Complete and total fearlessness on stage. Not the fake bravado kind. Not the I'm pretending to be confident kind. Real fearlessness. The kind that comes from genuinely not giving a damn about impressing anyone. When Dean walked on stage, he wasn't there to prove anything. He wasn't trying to win anyone over. He was there to sing some songs, tell some jokes, have a good time. If you liked it, great. If you didn't, that was your problem, not his. This attitude, this complete lack of neediness, it made him untouchable in a weird way. People respected it because it was so rare. Most performers were desperate for approval, desperate for success, desperate to please whoever was watching. Dean just was. He existed in this space of absolute self-assurance that wasn't arrogance, it was just pure indifference to outside judgment. And for years, this quality had served him perfectly. It made him a star, made him beloved, made him one of the most bankable names in entertainment. But on this Saturday night in November 1967, that fearlessness was about to be tested in a way that nobody, not even Dean himself, could have predicted. Because 5 days earlier, something started that would lead to this moment. This knife. This silence. This choice between becoming a legend and becoming a memory. It started with a phone call to Dean's hotel suite. He was getting ready for his evening show, reading the newspaper with his feet up, when his assistant Tommy Greco answered the phone. Dean glanced up and saw Tommy's face turn to stone. That particular shade of gray that means someone on the other end of the line just said a name that changes everything. Tommy hung up slowly like the receiver weighed 50 pounds. His voice came out shaky. Dean, that was someone calling for Marco Santino. He wants to meet you tomorrow morning at that restaurant on Michigan Avenue. Dean didn't look up from his paper, just turned the page like Tommy had asked him about the weather. Tell this Marco character I don't do breakfast meetings with strangers. He wants to talk. He can come to my show, buy a ticket like everyone else. Tommy's eyes went wide. Dean, you can't just blow off Marco Santino. This isn't some fan asking for an autograph. This is Marco Santino. The guy doesn't accept no as an answer. Dean folded his newspaper, set it aside, and looked at Tommy with that calm expression he wore when he'd already made up his mind about something, and nothing was going to change it. Listen to me carefully, Tommy. I'm an artist, not an employee. Nobody summons me to meetings like I'm some errand boy. He wants to talk, there's a phone. There's the stage. There's the bar after my show. Pick any of those options, but I'm not running around town to restaurants because someone snapped their fingers. Tommy tried to explain, tried to make Dean understand what he was dealing with. Marco Santino wasn't just some connected guy. He was the right hand of old Caruso himself. The man had a reputation that turned people's hair gray just hearing stories about him. 7 competitors had vanished over the last 3 years, and everyone knew Santino's name came up every single time. When Marco Santino requested a meeting, it wasn't a request. It was a command dressed up in polite words. You showed up. You smiled. You said yes to whatever he wanted. That was how you stayed alive. That was how you kept working. Dean just picked his newspaper back up. Then I guess Marco Santino is going to have to learn that Dean Martin doesn't respond to commands. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a show to prepare for. 2 days passed. 2 days where word started spreading through Chicago's underground that Marco Santino was being disrespected. That some singer, some entertainer who should know better, was refusing to meet with him. People who knew how this world worked started placing bets on how long Dean Martin had left to live. Friday night after Dean's show, he was in his dressing room loosening his tie when someone knocked. Tommy opened the door and a man in a leather jacket walked in without invitation. The kind of guy whose presence made the room feel smaller. Santino's waiting for you in a car downstairs. Says he wants to discuss business. Dean poured himself a whiskey, didn't even look at the guy. Tell Santino that Dean Martin just finished working for the night and he's going to bed. If he wants to discuss business, he can call my manager Bernie Kaplan next week and set up a proper appointment. The man's jaw clenched so hard you could see the muscles working under his skin. Martin, you don't understand who you're messing with here. Dean turned, looked at him with those calm, almost bored eyes. I understand perfectly. I'm dealing with someone who doesn't know how to ask for a meeting politely. Now you can stand there and threaten me, or you can deliver my message. Your choice. The man left, but everyone in that room knew this wasn't over. This was escalating. The next morning, Bernie Kaplan, Dean's manager, burst into his hotel suite, looking like he'd seen his own ghost. Dean, I got a call. Santino's furious. They're saying this is about his nephew. Kid wants to be a singer, wants to record an album. Marco thinks you've been advising the nephew to leave the family business for music. Dean looked genuinely confused. I don't even know his nephew. I've never talked to anyone about pursuing a music career. Bernie, I don't give career advice to strangers. Bernie was practically begging now, hands clasped together like he was praying. It doesn't matter if it's true, Marco believes it. That's all that matters in this situation. You need to meet with him. You need to explain. You need to smooth this over before it gets worse. But Dean had that stubborn set to his jaw. The same expression he got when his mind was completely made up and hell itself couldn't change it. I'm not going to apologize for something I didn't do. I'm not going to grovel to some guy who's making up stories about me. If Marco Santino has a problem with me, he can bring it up like a man. Face to face. but I'm not playing these games. Bernie left that hotel suite shaking his head, knowing he'd just witnessed someone sign their own death warrant. Because in this world, in this business, you didn't stand up to Marco Santino. You didn't refuse him. You didn't ignore his calls. You certainly didn't insult him by refusing to apologize for something he believed you did. You just didn't. Unless you were Dean Martin. Unless you genuinely didn't give a damn about the consequences. Saturday evening, the night everything came to a head. Dean arrived at the Crown Imperial around 8, his show scheduled for 10. The moment he walked in, he could feel it. That tension in the air that means something bad is coming. The bartenders were whispering to each other. The security guys were more alert than usual, hands closer to whatever they kept hidden under their jackets. At 9:30, Tommy came running into the dressing room, out of breath, face pale. "Dean, you need to cancel the show. Right now. We need to cancel it." Dean was adjusting his cufflinks, completely calm. "Why would I do that?" "Marco Santino reserved the entire balcony. He's coming with 20 of his guys. Dean, he's going to make a scene. He's going to do something in front of everyone." Dean looked at Tommy in the mirror. "So we'll have a full house. Sounds good for business." Tommy couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Dean, this isn't a joke. The man is coming to settle a score, in public, with witnesses. That's not good. That means he wants people to see what happens when you disrespect him." Dean stood up, straightened his bow tie. "Then I guess we're going to give him a show he won't forget." At 10 o'clock sharp, the lights dimmed. The band started playing, and Dean Martin walked onto that stage like it was just another Friday night in paradise. He started singing "Everybody Loves Somebody," his voice smooth and easy like honey. The crowd was into it at first, clapping along, enjoying the show. Then Dean looked up at the balcony and saw them. Marco Santino and about 20 men in suits spread out along the railing, looking down at the stage like vultures watching prey. And right there on the railing, reflecting the spotlight, was an open folding knife. Dean kept singing. Second verse, third verse. And then, in the middle of that third verse, Marco Santino did something that made the entire room understand this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a message. He picked up the knife, slowly, deliberately, and drew the blade across his palm. Not cutting himself, just the gesture. The universal sign for blood, for payment, for consequences. The band kept playing for another few seconds before they realized Dean had stopped singing. He was just standing there, still holding his glass of whiskey, staring up at Santino. The music died. The room went silent. Every single person in the Crown Imperial held their breath. Some people were already calculating exit routes. Others were frozen in place, knowing they were about to witness something they'd either tell their grandkids about or never speak of again. Dean Martin set down his microphone, picked up his whiskey glass, and walked straight toward the balcony stairs like he was heading to the bathroom. No hesitation, no fear, just walking. He climbed those stairs while the entire room watched, walked right up to Marco Santino, and set his whiskey glass down on the railing, right in front of the mobster, right next to that knife. "You look tense, friend," Dean said, his voice carrying in the dead silence. "Maybe you need a drink. This one's on me." Marco Santino stared at Dean. That look that everyone feared. That flat, empty stare that meant he was deciding whether you lived or died. The silence stretched out so long it felt like time had stopped. Then Dean spoke again, casual as anything. "Or maybe you want to come down and sing a few songs yourself. The audience is waiting for a show and you look like you've got something to say." He gestured toward the stage below, an invitation. "Come on, don't be shy." Still, Santino said nothing, just stared, the knife in his hand, the whiskey glass between them. Dean Martin standing there without a trace of fear on his face, and everyone watching, waiting to see if this was the night Dean Martin's luck finally ran out. Those seconds felt like hours, the entire club holding its breath, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the violence, waiting for the inevitable. And then Marco Santino did something nobody expected. He smiled. Not a friendly smile, a cold one. The kind that meant he'd just figured something out. He closed the knife slowly, the click of it echoing through the silent room, picked up the whiskey glass, and drank it in one smooth motion. "You've got steel nerves, Martin," Santino said, his voice carrying through the club. "I respect that." Dean nodded once, like Santino had just complimented his tie. Glad to hear it. Now, do you mind if I get back to work? People paid good money for a show. Santino waved his hand, almost amused. Go ahead, artist. Do your thing. Dean turned around, walked back down those stairs, picked up his microphone, and finished, Everybody loves somebody like nothing had happened. The audience, still not entirely sure they weren't in danger, slowly started clapping, then cheering, then going absolutely wild. Dean performed for another hour, every song perfect, every joke landing. And up on that balcony, Marco Santino and his 20 guys sat there the entire time, drinking. And when the show ended, they stood up and applauded louder than anyone else in the room. After the show, Dean was backstage when someone knocked. He opened the door expecting Tommy. Instead, Marco Santino stood there. Alone this time. No entourage. No muscle. Just a man in a gray suit. Can I come in? Dean stepped aside. Sure. You want another drink? They stood there in silence for a moment. Then Santino spoke, his voice different now. Quieter. More human. The nephew thing. Turns out the kid made his own decision. Had nothing to do with you. He'd been talking to some other people, making his own plans. I already handled it. Dean didn't ask what handled it meant. He didn't want to know. Santino continued. But here's the thing, Martin. I sent people to talk to you 3 times. You refused every time. Made me look weak in front of my organization. I couldn't let that slide. So I came to your show to remind you how things work in this city. Dean poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to Santino. And I reminded you that I'm not like most people in this city. Santino took the glass, almost smiled. Yeah, you did. Most guys would have pissed themselves when I did that knife thing. But you walked right up to me and offered me a drink like we were old friends. That takes guts. Or stupidity, Dean said. Maybe both, Santino agreed. They shook hands. Just like that, it was over. The war that never happened. The violence that got replaced with respect. Santino left, and Dean Martin had survived what should have killed him. But the story didn't end in that dressing room. By morning, every performer, every club owner, every connected guy in Chicago knew what happened. The legend started spreading immediately. Dean Martin offered Marco Santino a drink, during a threat, without flinching. It became the story everyone told.